Hi everyone. In this webinar, I'll try to introduce you to the concepts of web development. Okay, so here's the agenda at a glance, like what we are going to cover. Like we'll cover what is web development, what are the different components in web development. We'll briefly cover the different types of websites, some fundamentals which are required to understand what happens behind the scenes in websites, a little bit about backend front-end frameworks, security, and then we'll do some kind of a demo exercise to like get started with web development. So we all are familiar with websites. We have used them in our day-to-day lives. So web development is basically the process of creating maintainable websites, because the reason I stress on maintainable is because once we ship a website to someone, we build a website, we need to maintain it over a period of time so that different people can use and like the website stays up during different load conditions. Right? Typically, the activities involved in web development are like, first of all, the UI of the website should be good, the user interface should be good, and then building a fast and performant backend so that the website is pretty interactive and it's fast so that the users don't have to wait for any like kind of delays in the website. So some of the popular websites that we have used in today's age is like Facebook, Google, Airbnb. We are all are familiar with these websites. Okay, so coming to the different components in web development, we'll start with something called as computer networks. So it's a subject in computer science, but again, it's a very crucial topic because the websites are based on internet and then internet is based on computer networks. So I'll give you a brief introduction of what computer networks are. Then we have databases. So database is again essential for storing any interaction that the user does with the website. So any kind of data is stored in the databases. We have the backend components of web development, backend and APIs, which I'll elaborate shortly. Then we have front end and the user interface, which again we are all familiar with, like because we interact with the UI on a day-to-day basis. Then we have security of the web development. So how the websites handle security so that like the data is not leaked. And then we have some development tools that developers use in day-to-day life while building the websites. So again, websites can be broadly classified into two types: static websites and dynamic websites. So static websites is how the internet started with. The sole intention of building static websites were just to display some kind of an information, some kind of advertisement, any kind of information you wanted to share with the users were put up on static websites. And the primary way you can identify if it's a static website or it's a dynamic website is that websites that are static are solely built using HTML, CSS, because they just present information. No backend is required. And then any change of content on the page requires some kind of a change in the HTML and CSS code. So some examples are like people have portfolio website, resume websites, then documentation websites. So I've added a link for something similar. So this is some kind of a static website. If you see, there is no dynamic content, and this is just static text presented over the website. Now, coming to dynamic websites. So these are, I guess, the websites that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, which are like we have interacted with websites like YouTube, Swiggy, etc. So again, these websites have dynamic content, dynamic data on their user interfaces. So they require a backend, typically backed by a database, so that information can be changed based on the scenario and the user. It's built using HTML, CSS, which is for presenting the information. And we have JavaScript over here, which adds some kind of an interactivity to the website. So a way to understand this would be like, if you click on some link, if you click the like button on the Facebook, so whatever happens, whatever interaction happens, that's because of JavaScript. So moving on to computer networks, the reason I'm touching this topic is because internet is essentially a computer network. So you can think of computer network as a group of computers which are connected by some means like wired or wireless. So popularly, you might have heard of LAN connections. So LAN connections are there, wireless connections are there. Ultimately, all the devices should be able to communicate with each other somehow. And some of the main ways how we can do this is using IP addresses. So in order to communicate with each other, each computer needs to know the IP address of the other computer. So it's like the postal address in case of houses. So any message you want to deliver, we deliver that to IP addresses. Okay. Now, IP addresses are used to uniquely identify a device in a network or internet. So again, any device on the internet will have a unique IP address. The IP addresses won't conflict, they won't collide. So any message sent to a particular IP address will be always delivered to a specific machine at a time. Though IP addresses may change over time. So one device might have multiple IP addresses over the course of time, but at a given moment, the IP addresses are always unique across the network. Again, we'll discuss about the type of IP addresses. So we have public addresses, we have private addresses. So to understand this, we can think of it this way. Any device that's connected to the internet has a public IP address, and any device which is connected to any network that has a private IP address. So even like we have Wi-Fi routers at home, right? And we all can connect our devices to the Wi-Fi routers. So the moment we connect our devices to the Wi-Fi routers, each device, like be it a cell phone or a laptop, it gets a private IP address. And that is how the communication happens between your device and the Wi-Fi router. And then the Wi-Fi router itself has a public IP address because the router is connected to the internet. So any search you make, that's first sent to the router, and then the router sends it to the internet. That's how like the websites work inside like private network. And then, like with any communication, we have different languages, different formats. So we have different protocols how we communicate over the network. So some of the popular protocols are TCP/IP and UDP, and each has a benefit and a con. So TCP/IP is typically used over communication for HTTP websites, the traditional websites we use. The main characteristic of TCP and IP is like there is some sort of acknowledgement based for the messages we send. So if you request something, you will get a confirmation that your request has been delivered. So that's the characteristic of TCP/IP. In case of UDP, you send the message and that's the end of it. You don't get any kind of acknowledgement for the message. So the question might be that why do we use UDP in this place, right? Because it's always good to have a more reliable sense of communication where we get acknowledgements. So the reason for that is like since we don't wait for acknowledgements in UDP, so UDP is pretty fast. So UDP is much faster than TCP/IP since we are not waiting for acknowledgements. So in scenarios where speed is more important than reliability of any information, we prefer UDP. Moving on to the next slide. So I'll try to explain the process of how a website typically loads on your computer from the moment you hit a URL on the browser. So, like I mentioned, each website or each computer has an IP address associated to it, right? And each computer which serves a website or which hosts a website can be called a server. So each server has an IP address. Now, in order to access a website, we need to enter the IP address of the server, right? But it can be very challenging to remember IP addresses of different websites. So, for example, the IP address of YouTube can be something like 10.0.5. Something, which is very difficult for a normal person to remember. So, people came up with a concept called domain names. So, there is a domain name called youtube.com, which gets mapped to the IP address of the YouTube server. Now, the computers still work on IP address. So we need a service which can convert this domain name to the corresponding IP address. So for that, we have something called as DNS, which is domain name resolution. So this is a user, which is us in most cases. So we try to request some URL like skilllink.com in this case in the browser. Now the browser will send a request to DNS server asking for the IP address of skilllink.com. Now, the DNS then again can communicate with different computers or servers over the internet. But at the end, what happens is like the DNS server will return an IP address which is corresponding with this domain name. Now, once the browser gets the IP address, it can directly make the call to the website, and then the website returns the HTML data, which is processed by the browser, and we see the content of the website. So this is how things work behind the scenes when we are trying to access some website through the browser. Now coming to databases. So databases is primarily uses just to store, retrieve, and manipulate data in some ways. Typically, we have two broad categories of databases. One is SQL databases, one is NoSQL databases. No one is better than the other. Each has its own strength and weaknesses, and different databases are used in different applications in different scenarios. So the highlights of the databases in the summary is that SQL databases, they have some sort of a schema or a table in which you store the data, and the table has rigid column names. So for example, if you have a user table, then you'll have column names like username, first name, email ID, etc. The main characteristic of NoSQL database is like there is no table. You can store data in any format, and like typically it's faster to retrieve data since we don't enforce any constraints on the databases. Now, before moving to the frameworks, I'd like to explain some common terms before I move ahead. So one term we hear a lot is APIs, right? So API, the full form is Application Programming Interface. And in a nutshell, you can think of an API as a URL, which when invoked will call some kind of a function on the backend. So this is how the browser or the front end or the user can interact with the backend. There is a standard format for the API. You call a specific URL and then some corresponding function gets called in the backend. One more thing that we typically hear a lot in web development is CRUD. So CRUD just stands for create, read, update, and delete. And then coming to a framework. So framework is basically any software that's built to speed up your development process. It's designed to support and help user build websites. So instead of starting from scratch, you can use a framework which has a lot of functionalities and flows that are normally required already built in. So you build the website around the framework so that it's quicker to ship and quicker to deploy. Okay, so coming to backend frameworks. Um, Backend frameworks contain most of the business logic of the application. So business logic means, to give an example, like you register on a website. So what happens when a user registers on a website? Like an account gets created. So all this logic is generally defined on the backend part of the website. It interacts with the database to perform CRUD operations. So for example, when you register on a website, we use the create operation and we create a user for your account. And then when you log in, then we try to read the data of that user. And then if you go and update your profile somewhere, then we use typically update operations. And if you decide to somehow leave a website or delete your account, then we use the delete operation in the backend. And then it provides an interface with the front end or the user interface to share the data over APIs. So I'll demonstrate this shortly, how this happens. Some of the popular websites are built using backend frameworks like Django, Laravel, Rails. So Django is a Python-based framework. Rails is a Ruby-based framework. So there are many frameworks available in the market, and each has its own like strengths and weaknesses. Now, coming to the front-end frameworks, it also contains business logic of the user interface. So here the business logic means that any kind of interaction that the user does, we give some appropriate response for that. So for example, when you click on the like button on the Facebook post, you see that the like button gets highlighted with the blue color with some sort of animation, right? So all these aspects are handled in the JavaScript frameworks. So ultimately, it just adds interactive elements for the user to interact with the website. And then it integrates with the backend to display data. So we have the user interface, we have the structure of how we want to show the data, but ultimately the data comes from the backend via APIs. And then what the front end does, it just takes the data and it formats it in a way so that it looks good on the user interface. And some of the popular front end frameworks are React.js, Angular, and Vue.js. So I can quickly demonstrate this before we move to security aspect. I'll just pick a popular website like maybe Swiggy. So we see a lot of data available here, right? So now the question is, where is this data coming from? So for that, we have a tool on Chrome called as the Chrome Developers Tool. The way to launch it is you can just right click anywhere and then do inspect. And then there is a tab called network tab. So what this tabs shows us is like any API request that the front end makes behind the scenes. These are tracked here, and we can see how the interaction is flowing between the backend and front end. So let's say I search for something like now, if you see here, something got tracked here. So basically what Swiggy did over here is like it made a call to its backend and it passed in some parameters. Like it sent that the keyword that we are searching for is pizza, and we are searching for it in this latitude and longitude, which is basically my local area. Now, what the backend will do is it will try to match this pizza with all the restaurants that serve any dish which has types of pizza. And then it will try to filter the search more based on the area that I am based in. And then it will send me a response. So if you see in the data, we have suggestions. You will see all the data that you are seeing here as a suggestion is actually coming from the backend. So you can see Domino's Pizza is the first suggestion here, and then we have Pizza Hut somewhere. So you will see Pizza Hut. Next to it is Oven Story Pizza. So there is a lot of information that gets transferred over the backend. So if you see here, it will even tell you the parts that needs to be highlighted. So highlighted text, you see that pizza is highlighted, right? So in Oven Story Pizza, you see pizza is highlighted. So a lot of logic flows between the backend and frontend, and this all happens because of this API calls, which is essentially this URL that we are calling from the frontend. Now, moving back to the presentation. So, security is also an important concern. We all have heard of terms like HTTPS and HTTP. So, HTTP is just a protocol which tells the web browser how to request the data from a web server for a website and then how to display it. But any data that you make or any data that you share can be seen like you see over here. So even if you log in on some websites, the data is ultimately shared as a plain text over HTTP. So if somehow someone intercepts your request, like your request is coming from, let's say, your system to the server. If someone somehow intercepts that request, like we are able to do here, then they can clearly see what your password is, and then your account is compromised. So to prevent this, what we do is we introduced a protocol called HTTPS, which is HTTP and then an additional layer of security on top of it. So we use something called as encryption keys to actually encrypt the data. So before the UI sends any data to the backend, it encrypts the data using some key. So if anyone is reading the encrypted data, it seems like gibberish to that user. So they won't be able to make sense of it. And then when the backend receives the data, it's again decrypted back to the original text that was sent. And then the backend follows the same process. So backend will again encrypt the response and then send it to the front end. And then front end will decrypt it and then it will render that as a text on UI. So now for the demo, I will just demonstrate like something we can build with HTML and CSS because that's the simplest to get started with. The syntax is fairly simple and anyone can get started with it. And it's easy to demonstrate that on a browser. So the thing we are trying to build is we'll build some content, we'll build some counter, we'll build a button that can increment or decrement the counter, and then we'll try to style it using CSS. So there are websites like CodePen where you can directly add HTML CSS on the browser and you can like dynamically see what's getting rendered for that. So to start with this, so in HTML, basically every content is stored within blocks. So we define blocks using div tags. So in HTML, we have tags. We have a starting tag, an ending tag, and any content within it is interpreted as the content for that tag. So I can write anything like hello, and then it will be shown here. So let's start with adding one more div over here. And don't worry if you don't understand the syntax a lot. I'm just trying to illustrate like how simple it is to build something with HTML and CSS. So here, let's say I add a counter. Let's say I call it 0. And then I add one more container, which is like a box. And here I'll just add two buttons, one for incrementing it, one for decrementing it. And yeah, that's it. So the idea is like when I click on the plus button, this counter should get incremented. And when I click on the minus button, the counter should get decremented. Now, before moving on to the JavaScript, which adds this logic, we'll try to style it a bit. So for styling things, there is something called as classes. So let's say we build something of a container over here. And then now in CSS, we can add different kind of visual styles. So for example, I want to add some kind of a border on this container. So I'll write a tag border and I want it in black color. So you see like this is the container or the box that wraps all the content. So you see like there is a big border over here. Now I want to do the same thing for the counter. but just to show the difference, I'll maybe add that in red color. Now I'll do the same thing for the buttons, and I'll do that in, let's say, maybe blue color. You can see the three distinct boxes over here. Now we'll just try to arrange it a bit so that it looks nice. So there is a property called display, and we'll arrange it column wise, and then we'll try to center everything here. Now in the buttons, we'll try to, okay, before we go to the buttons, we will try to increase the font size for the counter. So we just specify the pixel size. And for the buttons, again, we can define some width and some height. And let's say we give some color, which is, we'll give a background color of, let's say, blue. And let's make the text color as white. And then again, we can increase the font size by something. So let's say we make it 20 pixels. Okay. Now I'll just get rid of the borders. Okay. Now we'll define a logic so that in JavaScript, so that when we click on the counters, the counter actually gets incremented. So for that, so each element that we see on a website is called a node or a DOM node. So we can reference elements uniquely using any property that's defined like ID on it. So if we want to access this element, we can define a variable C, and then we can get that element by its ID. And the ID we want is counter. And even here, I'll add some IDs so that I can access these buttons. So let's say I'll call it increment, and I'll call this decrement. So again, I can just get the buttons increment and decrement using the IDs. Now, what we are going to do over here is we are going to define, so in JavaScript, the only difference between JavaScript and the regular programming languages is like JavaScript deals with events, and there can be a lot of events on the browser. So there can be events like click, there can be events like scrolling and so on. So here what we try to do is we'll try to listen to something called as an event, which is a click event. So on this button, we'll add an event listener, which listens for click events. And if a click happens, yeah, then we basically execute any code that's within this function. And I'll also define a counter, which actually stores the like the current counter value in the memory. So when a click happens, we'll just increment the counter by 1. And then we'll try to display that counter in the HTML part. So for that, we can do something like inner text is equal to counter. So now you can see that it's incrementing. Similarly, we can just copy paste this logic, and instead on the increment button, we can add it on this decrement button. And then instead of incrementing the counter, we can decrement the counter. So yeah, so it's very simple to get started with JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Now there's a bunch of things that we can do. So even websites like Facebook, even though the logic is much more complex than what we are building here, but that's how things are in nature. Like there is an event listener on a button which listens to when you can click, and then when you click, something happens on the backend, and your friends are sent a notification that you liked a post. And then we can enforce more constraints on this language. Like let's say I don't want this counter to be more than 5. So I can implement some constraint like if counter greater than or equal to 5, greater than 5, greater than equal to 5, then we simply don't do anything. So if we can increment it, but after that we can't. So that's the limit. And similarly, you can do it for, like, you can implement any kind of logic you think over here. Okay. Now, again, let's get back to the PPT. So in web development, company, there are different tools that a person uses. So each tool has some purpose, and a single person doesn't need to know all the tools over here. So people just focus on the tools they require, and they like just work on the projects. So for example, there is something called as Git, which is like for tracking the code. We have package management. So in Java, we have something called as Maven. In Python, we have pip. In Node, we have npm. So all these are required to install the dependencies for any projects you're working on. Then for deployments, we have Docker, Kubernetes. So basically what deployments mean is like once you build the website, you need to put that website on a server so that normal people can access it over the internet. So that process is deployment. And then there are tools like CI/CD, which is the moment you do some code change in a Git repository, automatically your changes are deployed without any manual intervention. And then there are ticket tools like Jira, Trello, which is usually used to monitor the tasks that a person is working on. And then when we talk about deploying some website on the cloud, so you can have your own servers in which you can deploy, or there are platforms like Amazon Web Services and Azure on which you can deploy. Google Cloud is also one such platform. And once you build the application logic, testing is equally important to make sure things work. So there are different tools or test cases you can write for your code. And then there are some things like basically the software development life cycles, how the project manager is leading the projects, and how what process the team follows. So waterfall was a very standard and old model. Standardly, in most companies, people follow agile now, which is again like a 2 week cycle in which people build something, and then at the end of 2 weeks it gets reviewed like what we are able to ship. And then there are different web servers with Nginx and Apache. And again, just to stress on this, these are tools that maybe you will touch in your career, maybe you won't touch, but based on your roles, you can work with the tools. It's not a prerequisite to know any of these or all of these before you get started with anything. Okay. And then these are the different web development roles and the typical salary ranges based on my research on websites like Glassdoor and Payscale. So the backend engineer, which works on the backend logic, if you like more about building logics complex workflows, then backend engineer is a good role for you. The typical salary range is 3 lakhs to 15 lakhs. Again, this is no such limit. So 15 lakhs is what I gathered is like the average salary, but like actually it depends on your role, your experience, and the company you're working for. So there are people who are even earning more than these ranges and even less than these ranges. So it totally depends on your skill sets. Front-end engineer is again a person who will implement code mostly using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, building all those interactivity in the website. UI UX designer, the role of UI UX designer is to actually come up with the design of the user interface, how the button should look like, what's the color of the button, what should be the shape of the button, and so on. So the UX designer creates a design, which is then taken up by the front-end engineer, and he implements that using HTML and CSS. Then we have QA engineers, which actually test the products after it's built. We have DevOps engineer who deals with deploying the websites periodically on servers as updates are available. And then we have full stack engineer, which is like an all-in-one package. So you do the backend, you do the front end, you do the QA, you do the DevOps. You can do basically everything. Yeah. So these are the like more popular roles. Although there are many more roles that are actually now existent in the current market. All right. So that was all about the presentation.